Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share scary Wendigo horror stories. First story. What does it mean when a Wendigo doesn't attack me? True story. TLDR. I stared a Wendigo in the eyes, and it nodded at me before vanishing. Many years ago, I had an encounter with a Wendigo. I'm part Cherokee and had heard about these monsters before. It was late at night. I was a teenager. I lived with my family. We had a few dogs, and they needed to go outside before bed. One of the dogs would only go in our backyard. One of my family members opened the back door, and immediately the dog became aggressive. A dog that had never shown aggression before or after this night. Just as fast as she became aggressive, she became scared and ran back inside. I had just kicked my boots off after wearing them all day and was about to change out of my jeans when this happened. I quickly put my boots back on, grab a flashlight and a large club I had recently made. I book it out to the back of our house and just stop dead in my tracks. I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, but something was there. I could feel the presence of pure evil. Then I see a shadow moving, and it's huge. This shadow was easily 8 feet tall, vaguely humanoid, but had these massive antlers. Normally my flashlight is able to illuminate everything pretty well. Tonight, I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. It was like the light was going into a void. My eyes adjusted to the low light, only starlight letting me see it all. I stand there for what seemed like an eternity as I watched the figure search a workbench before it stops. The figure looks straight forward before turning around to face me, turning to reveal glowing red eyes. The figure and I stare at each other for what must have been only a moment, but felt like lifetimes. I know that showing fear in this situation is only going to kill me, and fighting is a death sentence. But for some reason, I lifted the club and pointed it at the figure. The figure looks at the club and looks back in my eyes before slowly nodding its head up and down a few times. I see my flashlight turn off in my peripheral vision. I look at it, and it turns back on, this time illuminating the entirety of the property. I quickly turn my focus back to the figure only for the figure to be gone. What was lifetimes to me was no more than a minute in reality. Second story. Wendigo encounter. I've been debating on sharing this story with anyone outside of my small circle of people that were there. But I want to share my experience in hopes that it saves someone's life or to give understanding of what someone else has experienced. Late fall 2010. In northern Canada, I went deep into the wilderness with my father and my eldest brother to hunt for moose. We left in the early morning, just before sunrise, trying to cover as much distance as possible before nightfall. We traveled winding rivers and had to repeatedly portage over rapids all day. We decided to set up camp just over halfway to our destination. My father figured that we'd make the rest of the journey tomorrow. Well, when everyone bedded down for the night, I decided to go grab some firewood and relieve myself down by the bank of the river, just out of reach of the light from the campfire. Out from the tree line, about 15 yards away, I could hear rustling in the bushes. I watched the area where I heard the noise and focused on that spot. I felt kind of funny, dizzy/lightheaded, and I could smell this putrid stink like old milk or rotten food. Then I saw the trees start to morph and move ever so slightly and began to take the shape of a head and slight facial features. My eyes began to adjust to the darkness, and along the tree line, I could hear this voice coming from there. I recognized it. The voice sounded like one of my relatives who had recently passed. The face took shape of my relative. "Hello," they said. "I've missed you. Come see me." I smiled and stepped forward a bit, but stopped to analyze the situation. My relative's face stopped smiling and became emotionless. The skin began to turn pale and peel away. Chunks of flesh from their cheeks began to fall away, and I felt shock and fear overwhelm my body. I couldn't make sense of it at all, so I started to back away and make my way to camp. I didn't realize at the time that I had been walking towards the voice, and I was further away from the firelight. The voice became angry and began shouting at me to come here, so I turned to run away. But as I looked back one more time, I saw the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. It was rotting flesh on gnawed bone, caved-in eyes, and a hollow chest cavity. This humanoid creature was tall and super thin. I ran as fast as I could, trying to yell for help, but the fear had made my voice quiet and raspy. I ran along the riverbank, and I could hear the heavy breaths and the stomping feet from this thing right behind me. I made it onto the top of the riverbank, but it grabbed a hold of my leg as I jumped up. I gripped and tore the grass, trying to lift myself, and yelled as loud as I could. Then finally my voice came back, and I yelled that someone has my leg. My brother woke up and ran over to where I was then. He pulled me up and took me over to the fire. I was terrified, trying to explain what I saw and that it looked like my relative, but not. I was trying to convince them that I wasn't seeing things, but my brother nodded his head and said, "I saw it too, I know." That solidified it. He acknowledged that it was real. We stayed up all night after that, rifles loaded and close by. We packed up when the sun was coming up and went back home. We haven't shared that story with anyone out of fear of being labeled as crazy or liars. I've had nightmares and couldn't sleep for months afterwards. I would see things slash dark figures looking into my window or hear whispers when I was walking home at night. Eventually, I was seeing this dark figure daily. I went to medicine men slash shaman for help, but I've learned that the ceremonies only relieves it temporarily. Friends have given me everything from protection pouches to certain crystals. I found out that there's a strong possibility that I encountered a Wendigo. I learned that if you encounter one and survive, it attaches itself to you like a parasite. I learned that it could only do this if it touches you, which it did. Ever since that night, I've been on edge when I enter any forest or wooded area, which sucks because I love being outdoors slash hunting and in nature. Now, I always feel like I need to keep my back against something when I'm out in the wild. Anyways, make your own conclusions about this. I've paid a price for being an ignorant child to the stories of old. They are real. I can attest to that. Third story. I hit what I thought was a deer. So last night, I was driving on a back road near Shepherdstown, West Virginia on my way home. I was speeding because I knew the road. All of a sudden, what looked like a deer ran in front of my car, and I braced for impact. This all happened in like a split second. I hit whatever it was, but the weird part was that there was no impact. Like I had just went through whatever it was. When I turned around, what I thought was a deer was standing in the road, right where I should have hit it, except it looked more like a deer mixed with a dog of some sort, and it was just standing in the middle of the road staring down my car. I don't know what this possibly would have been, but I don't believe in skinwalkers. And there's no way I missed it or it went under my car. It was dead on in front of my bumper, and my car is lowered. It would have done considerable damage. Fourth story. Apparition while deer hunting updated. I'm a big outdoorsman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So of course when I decided to go to college, I had to keep in mind that having some decent woods nearby was a must. Upon checking a couple of places out, I decided on going to Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, or just the borough. The biggest plus about going to that university is that my Uncle Fred lived up there and was a well-known name in the community. He owns to this day a framing shop right in the middle of the small town area. This was a huge plus since knowing people like that always equals more land to put spots in. That's all I really needed to pick the college I would be going to. Edinburgh is really cool because there are a lot of old buildings and strange, flat landscapes as compared to the hilly land around Pittsburgh. So it was cool to have to figure out how to scout the game I'd be going after once the season started. My main hunting area was directly behind my uncle's house. He has a beautiful log cabin that sits back off the road with woods on all sides of it. It was a true thing of beauty. When he had the house built, he actually had the gigantic chimney made of flat stones that were found in the woods behind the house. More on that later. As I was scouting the area for the first time, I came up on a few different circles of boulders in the middle of the woods. They were definitely very old. The boulders were quite big. Much too big to just be moved there for some reason, like a group of guys camping out. They must have taken 10 men to move them, and only if they had some kind of pulley system or something of the sort. There were also smaller rocks, and when I say smaller, I'm talking like somewhere around 300 pounds or more, making inner circles inside of the large boulders. Pretty crazy. I found a total of 7 of these stands throughout the property. Some of the rocks that were now part of the chimney. They simply had to be with the amount of rocks he used on it. Oh, also these rock circles also made a much larger circle around the woods. After a few more days of scouting with my buddy Brandon, we were sure we had our spots picked out for first day of archery. We couldn't wait to get out there. Perfect day, too. It was great. The thing about Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, is that it gets more snow per year than most of Alaska due to the lake effect snow coming across Lake Erie. What happens is before the lake freezes completely over, the water, which is warmer than the air, pushes the clouds way high up into the atmosphere. Too high for them to actually snow due to the low temperature all the way up there. The clouds then come inland and fall back toward Earth. It takes them about 20 miles to do this. Edinburgh is about 20 miles from the lake. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, on the first day of archery, which is in the first week of October in Pennsylvania, there was a thin layer of snow. This is perfect for archery because you can see the deer in the woods much more easily, and you can also see if any animals left any tracks. If they did, they were fresh since the snow didn't happen too long before that. In our trees, for about 2 hours or so, neither had seen anything yet. I had just got off the radio with Brandon, whom was on the other side of the property, when I seen some movement over to my right in the pine thicket. I then seen a branch move a little bit and seen 4 deer legs under. I readied my bow and my stance so as to make a good clean shot at the deer. Around 15 feet up in a tree, I did this very carefully. About a minute later, as I was looking for any movement, I lost the 4 logs inside of the thicket. This was expected due to the fact that where that deer would have been is a common feeding area for them. So I waited. Maybe another minute later, I caught movement again. It looked as if the deer would break through the thicket into more open woods. The moment I've been waiting for. As I brought the bow up into a full draw stance, I was stunned by what I was seeing. Where the deer should have been, there was a man. A strange-looking man at that. This absolutely should not have been. If there was a man anywhere near where that deer had been, the deer would have been long gone, spooked back into the thicket. I put my bow back down onto the hook I had screwed into the tree and lifted my binoculars to my eyes. At only around 35 yards away, I could now see great detail of his physical appearance. He was rather rotund, with his belly leading the way. A white, long-sleeved shirt on with ruffles down the middle of it. Just like the pirate shirt in that one episode of Seinfeld, if any of you so indulged. It was tucked into thick, canvas brown pants, with pants being tucked into white socks directly below his knees. Further down, where his shoes should be, was absolutely nothing. He had no feet whatsoever. No calves, no shins, no shoes. With my eyes wide open, I mouthed to myself, what the heck? Instead of walking, he seemed to float through the woods, going from right to left. This is when I started noticing other extremely strange things about him. I looked through the binoculars at his head. It was cocked back with his chin resting down on his lower neck. His very large, red, bulbous nose up in the air a bit in a sort of snobby overall look. The hair, though, it was covered by a wig that judges in England wear. A white wig with 3 curls on the side of it where his ear would have been. I noticed that he didn't just seem to float through the woods. He was floating through the woods. His arms stayed stuck at his sides, unmoving as he traveled. He also never looked down. The way his head was cocked, he could have only been looking upward. This is not any person or animal walks in the woods, constantly looking down and around for obstacles that you may trip over. All of this happened within a time period of maybe 20 seconds or so. He had came out of the thicket behind a medium-sized oak tree. Then when he hit the next oak, he never came out from behind it. I watched in absolute astonishment for another 5 minutes, waiting for him to break his cover so I could see him again. This never happened. I told Brandon what had just happened and was immediately made fun of. I expected that was what would be coming through the radio after I got done talking. He was saying I should have taken a picture of the only deer/human minotaur remaining in the world. I told him he won't be laughing when the director came over to his tree stand and smacked his ass right out of it. Even though it was the middle of the hunt, I had to get down to see what the hell just happened. I knew where he would have walked. Not only would I see footprints in the snow, but it would have also been very easy to see even better tracks due to the fact that the area where he was full of muddy ground. A freaking hummingbird would have left tracks in this muddy mess. As you probably guessed, when I got over to the spot where he had been, I seen not one track from him, or a deer, or anything else that lives on planet Earth. I was utterly amazed. What happened later that night was just as creepy, but due to this post being super long, I'll save that for my next post. The scary stuff didn't even begin yet at this point on that fateful night. Part 2. After I got done checking out the muddy/snowy ground where the man should have left some kind of sign or footprints, I went back to my tree stand and climbed back up to the height that I'd been hunting from earlier. I radioed Brandon and told him I was back up the tree and secure. We always did this as a precaution in case something happened while we were climbing the tree or securing the platforms of the portable tree stand. My old man's buddy Bunky actually saved his left eye from being completely blind and useless. He was practicing shooting from a raised platform when he slipped and fell off, driving a stick right into his eyeball as he hit the ground. This has nothing to do with the story, but all you hunters out there should adopt this practice. You know, the more you know, and all that shit. I digress. We hunted the rest of the day, but not without periodic ragging from Brandon, making fun of me about the director throughout the rest of the hunt. I knew I'd be hearing about it for at least a week or so, maybe longer. That is, of course, if the rest of the night would have been a normal one, which it turns out was not. As twilight approached, I radioed Brandon and told him I was going to start getting out of the tree. Brandon was actually in a built stand that we found while scouting in the months prior. So I had him meet me at my spot due to the fact that it was going to take me much longer to get my stand down and off the tree. Just as I thought, Brandon was walking up to my spot right as I was getting to the bottom of the tree. Once I got all the way to the bottom, I unhooked the straps that were around my feet, jumped down to the ground, and started feverishly explaining to him again everything that happened. I took him over to the muddy area to show him that there were absolutely no tracks in the snow or the mud. I definitely could sense that he didn't completely believe everything I was telling him. I was able to sense this so easily because he looked right at me with his mouth agape and his eyebrows pushing up towards the middle of his forehead and said, "Are you fucking with me, brother?" He also was able to tell that I wasn't messing with him when I looked at him with what I'm sure are some of the craziest eyes he's ever seen and said, "Hell no, I ain't with you." When he realized that I was 100% serious, he started taking inventory of all of the things that I had previously told him, and we went back and forth trying to make any kind of sense of what I'd seen at all. While we were talking to each other back and forth, we had failed to notice that nighttime was already upon us. It was that Stephen King full dark, no stars kind of nights too. Due to the fact that we were looking for signs left behind from the ghost guy, we were in a patch of woods that we weren't very familiar with. We may have been pretty close to where my stand was, but once night falls in the woods, it's a whole new ball game. Still, the patch of woods we were in was enclosed by a triangle of roads. All we had to do was walk in a straight line, and we would come out somewhere on one of the roads, then just walk that road back to my uncle's house. So we started walking. Walking in a straight line in the woods is almost impossible to do without a compass, which I didn't have. So we were both figuratively and literally in the dark when it came to where we were. A couple minutes into the walk, we heard a loud scream, as if someone was being murdered. Now I know what every animal in the woods around here sounds like, both normally or in panic mode, making death cries. I see videos often on YouTube of people recording a sound in their backyard that they think is a person who needs help, only to be a rabbit screaming from being attacked by some predator like a coyote or fox. This was not that at all. After waiting a couple minutes to see if the screaming would continue, we started walking again in the direction we thought we should be going. We didn't talk much about what we had just heard, probably because of the anxiety we were both feeling. We couldn't ignore it for long, though, because we heard another long, blood-curdling scream. It was closer this time and sounded different. At first we thought it sounded like a woman being attacked. This new scream sounded threatening. Ironically, we felt like we were the ones being stalked and hunted at this point. Still, we pushed forward. After walking about another 100 yards, we came across something very strange. Directly in our path were these weird, clear, gelatinous masses on top of the leaf litter. Now I am 32, which isn't an age that necessarily screams wisdom from experience, but I've been in the woods since as far back as I can even remember. My old man taught me everything there is to know about the wilderness around us. So take it from me, these clear globs should not have been there. The only thing I could think of that could even slightly look like it was tree sap, and this was absolutely not sap. I poked one of the masses with a stick, fearing what they were made of. I had read a story about a town that had clear, gelatinous globs rain down on them. A lot of these people got very sick, and if I'm not mistaken, I think a couple of them even died from it. So needless to say, I was taking precautions. Their consistency was that of a thick gelatin, like if you made Jell-O with only 1 cup of water instead of 2. Once we started walking again, we started to come across a good amount of this stuff. It wasn't all over the woods. Instead, it was directly in front of us as we walked. Almost like someone or something knew which route we would try to take and marked it with these globs. Another scream, this time even closer and with a little something added in. This time, not too far away from us, we heard leaves rustling and a couple of twigs snap. Something was definitely there. It could have been a deer, but this was unlikely. Whatever it was wasn't spooked at all. Not from us or the threatening scream. It's easy to tell when you've spooked an animal and they start running. On top of that, most of the leaves were still very moist, therefore not making as much noise as they normally would. This sent our anxiety level through the roof. At that point, the only thing that was on our mind was getting the hell out of there. We were no longer curious about floating men, screams, or alien jelly. We just wanted out, which should have been very soon. The distance we walked should have come across a road by now, but it hadn't yet. Stranger still, we couldn't even see any house or street lights at all. Still, we just kept walking, thinking we'd find our way out very, very soon. This was not to be, at least not yet. Our flashlights were now beginning to die, so we were definitely in a hurry. Which, by the way, is not what you should do if you were ever even maybe lost in the woods. Cool heads always prevail in that situation. Anyway, as we were walking, we started to see a couple of pine trees. This was very strange because we had thoroughly scouted this land. The only pine trees were over near my stand where we started. After seeing a couple more, we started to get a foreboding feeling, almost like a sick, anxious, panic feeling. We stopped for a minute to check our surroundings and found that at the exact spot that we stopped was the same spot we started. We were standing right next to a pine tree with a dead pine next to it that had a branch broken off and dangling still from a severed limb. How could this be? We had been sure that we were walking in a somewhat straight shot out, but that must have been an impossibility since we must have made a circle. We had no idea whatsoever how this had happened, especially since we were in the exact spot we started at. Also very strange, we seen my tree stand that was still hanging on the tree. It was very close to us, but when we started to walk out, it was nowhere to be found. We walked over to it and immediately found the trail that we had to take to get out of the woods. It led directly back to my uncle's backyard. The trail actually went right past the live pine tree we had just been standing under. There is in no way we had missed that in the beginning. To add more to the strangeness, as we walked only about 20 yards down the trail, we could plainly see my uncle's light that he had above his garage to illuminate his driveway. Our minds were blown, but at least we were able to get out. On the last 100 yards on the trail, we found more clear gelatin globs directly down the middle of the pass. This was definitely crazy because they absolutely were not there when we walked in. We had both been on that trail when we entered the woods. We would have seen them for sure. We heard no more screams after the time we heard the rustling of the leaves and the twigs break. But we had a strong feeling of being watched when we were still in the woods, and an even stronger version of that same feeling as we stepped into my uncle's backyard. This is at the top of my list for scariest experiences in the woods. I have no explanation for any one part of it. Not the floating ghost guy, not the screams or the globs, not the getting lost in the woods, and not the circles of boulders. I would love to hear from anyone who had anything like this happen to them. There has to be some kind of answer, but at this point all I have is my story about what had happened that night, and thankfully one other person who went through it with me. At least he has been able to validate what had happened to people that don't believe this actually happened to us. Whether you guys believe it or not is up to you, but I promise that this all happened exactly how I wrote it. I know it sounds pretty crazy and out there, but this stuff actually happened, and that's a scary thing to think about next time you guys find yourselves in the woods. Something incredible had happened back there. I'm thankful that we were able to get out of the woods without having anything bad happen to us. What it did do was made my wanting to understand the paranormal even stronger. One day I'm going to go back there by myself and camp for a night or two in the hopes that something might happen again and that I have the wherewithal to seek whatever it was out and get some answers that I desperately need. Fifth story, my experiences as a crime scene cleaner. To start out, you need a little backstory to show how I got into this situation. When I got out of high school around 2003, finding a job was difficult, so I took whatever horrible jobs I could get by. When I found a job cleaning fire and water damage full-time, I was excited to have steady income and start saving, but this quickly turned into a nightmare that I had to endure for almost 2 years. The company I worked for put me on my first job, which was a water damage claim where a basement flooded with sewage. So after a few days of work, we finished, and it was on to the next job. My boss then called me into his office the next morning and told me about a special crew that he was setting up and asked if I would be the crew leader supervising 3 other guys that were just hired. I found this strange as I had only been working there a total of around 3 days, but figured my work ethic was already paying off and I would get a raise. I only made 10 hours to start. Not only did I not get the raise, but I got no training in the new position other than a work van with cleaning material and the phone numbers for the 3 new guys that also were hired in to do fire/water damage cleanup. The boss told me what tools were best to use and what cleaning products to use to sanitize, along with where everything was located in the van with hazmat suits and respirators. But he was vague about what kind of things I would clean up. He just said the situations were always different and I would get detailed instructions each job. He called my position CSC crew leader. The boss told me that I would never have to see the deceased, as the coroner would have the remains gone by the time my crew got there, and to use my logic to determine what needed to be removed from the homes and what could be cleaned. The first job I had in my new position, which the boss told me about when I got to the office, was cleaning up the remains of elderly man or woman who died in their house and had been laying in chair. When we arrived, the coroner had me come inside to show me a few things that were considered hazardous material and needed to be removed due to the risk of disease. I guess my boss knew a few people from the county coroner's office, and much of the work came from their recommendations. Not only was the deceased still in the house, but was fully visible to me and the other guy, and you could smell the rot through the masks as the house had no AC, and this was mid-June. The coroner was backed up and waiting on additional people to show up to load the body as it was falling apart. And I call the body it because I honestly couldn't tell if it was male or female and was trying not to look too long as it was disturbing. The other 3 guys I worked with handled it well, but 2 got sick from the smell and has to go outside to puke. We all waited outside after the coroner showed us the chair, the fluids that leaked into the carpet, and the basement where the fluids went through the subfloor and puddled on some boxes in the basement. The coroner's support arrived and took the deceased out, and me and the crew started working. After about 5 minutes, weird things started to happen, the first of which was when I began to disassemble the chair. I had removed the back of the chair and was putting it into the special hazmat bags that I was given, and the base started to rock when I was about 10 feet away, putting the bag with the back of the chair by the front door. Nobody else was in the same room as the other guys were in the basement dealing with moving boxes. I brushed it off and took apart the base of the chair as much as I could, and when I got it into the bag, I got a chill on my back and then began feeling sick. I just figured it was the shock of what I was cleaning hitting me and pushed on, even though the chill was strange as I was very hot in full hazmat in June. Next was removing the carpet and assessing the floor to see if it would be able to be cleaned or if I had to remove a section of the floor. So I called the boss to ask him, and he told me just to pour the special cleaner on the area to soak into the floorboards, and it would be fine. So I got out of the truck where he said it was and brought it inside. When I got inside, all three of the guys in the basement were scrambling to get out of the basement, tripping over each other, and all three ran outside. When I asked them what was up, all three said there was someone in the cluttered basement, and they assumed it was a homeless person or junkie. Detroit has many issues with these kinds of things. I listened at one of the open windows to the basement. It's kind of the first thing we did when we started working. Open any window possible, prop the doors open, so maybe someone got inside then or possibly before we got there and was hiding. After listening a few minutes and hearing nothing, me and another of the workers went inside, armed with a mag light and a piece of metal fence post, and searched the basement. Nothing was down there but the footprints of the shoe covers we used, but when we started up the stairs, we heard a horrible hacking cough from somewhere in the basement. When we looked for it, there was nothing, but the corner of the basement had a bunch of dust stirred up like someone was moving things very recently that weirded us both out. We called the guys back in, and they got back to the boxes, but all of them kept feeling like they were being touched while throwing away material from the boxes that got fluids on them. I went back to my upstairs job, but found that the cleaner I put next to the floorboards was gone, and I started getting frustrated as it was the only jug I had of this cleaner, and I clearly remember it being set next to the area before the guys ran up the stairs, and my attention was redirected. I began to take out trash, figuring I would find it eventually, or the basement guys took it for the floor, and I found it on its side behind a bag that had the back of the chair. This is impossible. There were like 6 other bags in front of this one near the front door, and this was a gallon bottle of cleaner. Again, I got a chill, but this one was brought on by what sounded like a whisper that I could not make out the words to. Cleaned the floorboards and moved out trash. Job complete. That night, each member of my crew had a dream about an older man telling us that we are not welcome in his home, touching his belongings, and we need to leave. In my dream, I was alone in his house. The old man cried and told me I was destroying his things and he couldn't replace anything. He was trying to push me out of his house, but it was like I was ignoring him. Even when he would push me and scream at me, no reaction from me. He then threw my cleaner into the garbage pile I had made by the front door, exactly where I found it. 2 of the 3 guys in the crew told me their dreams about the old man pushing them as they went through boxes of ruined pictures and other old stuff that needed to be thrown out due to the risk of disease from his fluids. They also said it was like they had no control and were on autopilot. They said they were so sad but couldn't do anything. The thing that got me about the dreams of the other 2 guys was they both said the man was getting so upset that he began violently coughing, and that the man kept grabbing their arms when they would touch boxes or throw things into the trash. Neither of the guys were in the house when me and the other guy heard the coughing from the basement. The guy that went into the basement with me said he had a dream, but all he remembered was waking up sad like he did something wrong and had a horrible coughing fit, which might just be a coincidence, but I connected it in my mind as relating to the other dreams. We all talked about it and came to the conclusion that we were all just having a reaction to a situation, and it was nothing more than our brains coping with what we had to do. I am very into psychology, so I rationalized it the best I could, and we hoped for better assignments the next day. Next few jobs were not so bad. Cleaning up blood at a home invasion. No casualty, but huge mess. Then there was a few other bloody crime scenes with casualties, but nothing notable happened. About 2 weeks into the job, we began to learn the tricks of the trade and were split into 2 different groups that I was responsible to manage as crew leader. So I would have to go to different sites if the other 2 guys had an issue or didn't know what to do. I thought I was getting used to the job as well as the other guys as we had no other experiences like the first job, but I was wrong. The next job that there was activity was a suicide of a man that was middle-aged. The coroner had already removed the body, but it was a mess. The guy had shot himself with what I think was a large caliber handgun or shotgun, as the spray was everywhere in the basement and like a second living room. There were skull fragments lodged in drywall, brain matter all over, and again, he was not found for a bit, so the smell was horrible. First step in cleaning this was using our backpack vacuum cleaner to suck up all the biomaterial. The coroner told us when we went in that he and his partner were extremely uneasy in the house, and it felt strange, and we immediately started getting a claustrophobic, suffocating feeling when we went into the basement as well. To make matters worse, the family of the man had came over and were crying upstairs, but the vacuum noise helped to cancel out that. While I was cleaning, the power to the lights went out, and it was completely pitch black. This was strange because my vacuum was still powered. My crew mates started screaming at this point, so I turned off my vacuum and climbed off my ladder. I thought maybe he touched a wire to the lights, but when my vacuum unit was turned off, he was still screaming, and I could hear things being knocked over. I started fumbling around for my flashlight on my tool belt and yelled for my friend asking what was going on, but all I got back was panic screaming. Then I saw in the pitch black something darker that was moving in my direction, and I will admit, I freaked out. I slipped trying to back up, still looking in my belt for the flashlight, and found it when my back hit the basement wall. I turned on the light, aimed at the blackest shape I have ever seen, and when the light turned on, I saw the shape of a man wearing a flannel shirt, beard, and an expression like he was about to attack me. Then it was just gone. My crewmate was behind where the entity was, sitting on the floor rocking with his hands on his head. When I approached, he picked up his flashlight off the ground and turned it on, then ran up the stairs and outside, and threw up. I followed behind him, asking if he was okay and why he was screaming. I thought I just imagined the entity and the man because his screaming scared me, but he told me that he was scrubbing the wall and felt something pulling on something in his tool belt, and he thought it was me. But when he turned around, the lights went out, and he was engulfed by what he said was like dark smoke, and he immediately could not breathe and was struggling to move. He managed to pull his flashlight out, but it was knocked out of his hand like his wrist was grabbed with force, and he managed to scream. When he screamed, trinkets started falling off entertainment center that was about 3 feet to his side, and the black smoke moved back, but he was close to passing out from exertion. He also said he lost hearing and didn't know that any noise came out when he started screaming and that the stuff falling off the shelves was landing on him, and that's why he was covering his head. He said it felt like a weight was lifted off him when the dark smoke backed up, but he felt sick right away, and the light from my flashlight made the sick feeling increase. We took an early lunch where he just sat there, pale as ever, and didn't say much other than he said he breathed in that smoke and didn't feel right. I got him some Gatorade, and his color started to come back. I never told him I saw a man when I turned on my light, because we still needed to finish, and I didn't want to put that in his head since he never mentioned seeing it. When we went back, the lights in the basement were on again. Half the things that fell from the shelves were back in the entertainment center, and the TV was on baseball. There was also a different smell in the room, similar to burnt hair. My worker stayed a half hour, got sick again, and went home for the day, leaving me alone to finish, which I didn't want to do, but had to, as the other guys had their own job. After cleaning up everything with my vacuum, I began scrubbing the old blood, which is hard after it congeals, mix in brain matter, and it is like glue, even with cleaner. While I was finishing up, I kept seeing the shape of a person always in the side of my vision. Each time I would smell that strange burnt hair scent, and a few times I also felt like a force was pulling at items on my belt. Not sure what item, as there were several things in my belt. When I finished the job, I went to use the bathroom upstairs, and in the hallway along the way, I heard like muffled crying or moaning. I froze up and stayed, still thinking maybe a family member had came back, and when I panned around, there was nothing, but I saw a picture on the wall of a man with a beard wearing a flannel. Several other pictures in the hallway of other scenarios of the same man, different flannels with deer or fish or family. I had not seen a picture of that man, as I had not been anywhere else in the house with a bathroom, nor did I use the bathroom downstairs because pulling off the hazmat stuff is a pain. As I was securing the house, closing all windows, locking doors and shutting down every light but the front porch light, I saw the front curtain move and again saw the darker than black form in the front window. The last experience I will share in this thread happened mid-July in a very bad area in Detroit. There had been an incident where a guy supposedly tried to abduct a child, was stopped by people in the neighborhood who beat the man very bad, and he escaped to his house, where the neighborhood people quickly called police and civilians surrounded the man's house to prevent escape. The police response time in this area is horrible, and the people were throwing rocks through the man's window and damaged his car. The man was hurt bad by the mob and was hurt by a rock or glass and died in the home. This is assumption by DPD. For what the police officer told me, it was a misunderstanding and the man picked up a girl that was injured riding her bike, and some kids that knew her told their parents that the man was kidnapping her, and people overreacted and the man was brutally beaten. The cleanup was pretty simple to do. We secured windows, cleaned up blood and bodily fluid, but as soon as I entered the house, I just felt wave after wave of fear and sadness, like I have never felt this before, and it hit in waves that made my legs weak. My working buddy who was there showed up late and didn't get the story from the cop like I did, but experienced the same feelings I had. The whole time we were there, we saw a form darting around corners like it was watching us, then hiding. It was similar to like a small bit of fog or mist. We also heard very slight cries for help coming from several areas in the house, and also what sounded like, "Please stop," and a few times the crowd came back and yelled at the house also. And when this was going on, the activity in the house increased, and we could hear running footsteps go up the stairs, a door slam, and it sounded like the front door would open and close, but we never saw any of the doors move. The path of the footsteps sounded like from the front door, through living room, to the bathroom, to stairs to the upstairs bungalow room. The part that really got me was I could feel the floor impacts that felt like the vibrations of someone running past me when I was cleaning the areas. And each time I would be hit by one of those waves of fear and sadness. When we left the house, there were a few people on porches hanging out like is usual during summer, and the people were still hostile and yelling random things, but directed at us as we loaded the van and took off hazmat suits. We ignored this, but before we had loaded all the material from the house into the van and locked the house, the front door slammed hard enough to sound like a gunshot, which scared me and my crew member along with the people on the front porch to the point where they went inside. The front door deadbolt was somehow locked, and we could not get it open. I think it was a different key than the knob. So we ended up leaving several boards in the house that were left over from boarding a few of the windows. The feeling of relief when I left the house was like night and day. Inside, I was anxious, scared, paranoid, and just really down, which would be due to knowing the story. But when I got outside, it was like flipping a light switch. I immediately felt better, and me and the other guy in my crew were joking and laughing about dumb stuff and normal 19 and 20-year-old shenanigans. I have many of these stories written down in detail in a journal I started after the first 3 months of working at this job. I talked to the guys on the crews and got other strange stories from them too. I know that some of this could very well be formed by my subconscious mind to cope with traumatic situations, but some of it has no explanation, and when I hear other members of my crew tell me their stories when they haven't been influenced by mine, that is a horse of a different color. When I have time, I will pull out the journal and give more of my experiences. The job got way worse when I started the journal after 3 months in. Several experiences with what I think was paranormal, many situations that stressed my mental state to the point where my mask of sanity started to slip. In the end, I worked at this place for almost 2 years, and of my crew, all died, 2 from suicides, 1 from drug overdose that could have been intentional, but we will never know. I just know that when these 3 guys my age, around 19 and 20, started this job, all were normal, well-adjusted guys with no cares in the world other than girls, parties, and working. I watched each one of them slowly drain their joys and passion for life. And I know this sounds bad, but each one that died was considerate enough to die in a clean way. Most likely, so another person wouldn't have to see the horrible thing that we all saw so often. 6th story. I think there's a Wendigo in the Minnesota woods. First things first, I wasn't there, but I was the first person he told. This happened in southeast Minnesota. I'm not going to be telling the exact location, but it was in a smallish forest on a long bike trail. One more quick thing. It was really windy this day. My friend, who we will call S, and his father were on a bike ride. It was about a 12-mile bike ride. So they're doing their thing when about 5 miles in S sees what he thinks is a deer. They keep going, and S sees a flash of brown next to them in the trees, and it is like this thing is running next to them. like keeping pace, but he doesn't hear anything. He points it out to his dad, and his father says that it's probably a deer, but he agrees it is really weird. So they keep going. They get to this little beach where they usually rest and look at the river. S notices something feels off. He notices that first of all, there is no trees swaying. Secondly, there is no animal noises. Then he realizes he didn't see any animals the whole time they were there, except the deer. The silence was heavy. It was like every animal left. The woods were silent. S tells his dad that he isn't feeling very well and that he wants to go home. His dad begrudgingly agrees. They get on their bikes, and S is almost hyper-aware of his surroundings. They go for a while until S sees a flash of brown again and antlers. They keep going until they hit this clearing. The clearing looks like a big field with trees around it and a bike trail through it. As they enter the clearing, S looks back, and there's the beast standing on its hind legs, and he said it was like 9 feet tall. It had antlers, and it looked like it had a deer head or some shit. He said he was terrified. They finally got out of the woods, and the wind was back, and there was animal noises again. I think this was a Wendigo, but I am not sure. I honestly don't know if I believe him, but we are in Minnesota, and it wouldn't be impossible. But are we a bit too far south for Wendigos? If you have any ideas or theories, please let me know. Okay, apparently, I haven't hit the minimum word count, so I'll give you more minor details. We are pretty much at the bottom of Minnesota, nowhere close to Rosisu, Minnesota. Like I said, it was really windy this day, like really windy. I think S is kind of sensitive to the paranormal, just a little bit. Although the Wendigo isn't really paranormal. They have been biking on this trail before. They didn't go the whole way, they went about half. I think it is too short to be a Wendigo. Is it possible it is a skinwalker? I looked on a map, and the tribes that were in this area were the Dakota Sioux. This area usually has a lot of wildlife. It was before noon when this happened. He didn't see any other people other than him and his dad. Neither of us know what to think about this. I'll ask him about what it smelled like or if it smelled weird in the area. 7th story. A Wendigo encounter while ice fishing. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend, a getaway from the stress of work and the chaos of life. I packed my gear, loaded up the truck, and headed to a remote lake in northern Minnesota, far away from the noise of civilization. Before I left, though, I stopped by a bait shop on the edge of town to stock up on supplies. The place was old, with faded signs and dusty shelves, but the owner seemed friendly enough. A grizzled man in his 60s who looked like he'd spent most of his life outdoors. "You're headed up to Coldwater Lake?" he asked, handing me a bundle of waxworms. "Yeah," I replied, trying to match his casual tone. He paused for a moment, his weathered face tightening. "Be careful out there. It's not just the cold you've got to watch for." I laughed nervously, thinking he was referring to thin ice or maybe bears. "What do you mean?" He leaned in closer, lowering his voice like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Strange things happen up there. People hear sounds, see things. Folks around here don't like to talk about it, but you do well to keep your eyes open and your fire burning." I chuckled awkwardly, brushing it off as local superstition. "Thanks for the tip," I said, paying for my supplies and heading out the door. But as I walked back to my truck, I couldn't shake the look in his eyes, something between fear and pity. It stayed with me during the drive, and when I finally arrived at the lake, I found myself glancing over my shoulder more than once. Like I said before, it was supposed to be a relaxing weekend. The locals warned me about the weather. They said the cold could seep into your bones and never leave. But I wasn't worried. I'd ice fished a dozen times before and thought I knew the dangers. Boy, was I wrong. The lake was a vast, frozen sheet of white, surrounded by dense pine trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. I set up my tent in the middle of the lake, drilled a hole in the ice, and settled in for what I hoped would be a peaceful day of fishing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature plummeted. The stillness of the lake became unnerving. No wind, no sounds, just silence. It was as if the world had been put on mute. That's when I heard it. A faint, distant scream. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or the cry of an owl. It was human, but not quite. a wail that carried pain, hunger, and something primal. I froze, my breath fogging the air as I strained to listen. The sound came again, closer this time, echoing across the icy expanse. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down I knew better. The ice beneath me groaned and cracked, a sound every ice fisherman fears. But this wasn't the natural settling of the ice. It felt purposeful, as if something massive was moving beneath me. Panic set in. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the lake. That's when I saw it. At the edge of the trees, a figure stood, tall and impossibly thin. Its eyes glowed like embers in the darkness, piercing through the shadows and locking onto me. Antlers jutted from its head, twisted and jagged, and its skeletal face was stretched into a horrific grin. It stepped onto the ice with unnatural grace, its long, clawed hands dragging against the surface. The scream came again, but this time it was in my head, a deafening roar that filled my mind with images of starvation, death, and despair. I scrambled to pack my gear, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip my bag. The creature moved closer, its body convulsing as if it were struggling to contain itself. Its teeth, jagged and yellow, gnashed together in anticipation. Then it stopped. It tilted its head, as if studying me, and let out a guttural hiss that sent chills down my spine. Without thinking, I grabbed the propane heater and hurled it toward the beast. The flames erupted on impact, and the Wendigo shrieked, a sound so inhuman and agonizing that I thought my eardrums would burst. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran, leaving everything behind, my boots pounding against the ice until I reached the truck. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The lake was empty, but I swear I could still hear the faint echo of that scream, following me through the night. I haven't gone ice fishing since, and when people ask why, I just tell them the truth. There's something out there in the cold, something that doesn't belong in this world. And it's hungry. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.